Hey, what's happening, everybody? It is Sergeant First Class David Donaldson. I am going to be talking with a very good leader of mine. I'm going to be talking to First Sergeant Little. I found out in the middle of this conversation that he is going to be up for Sergeant Major. He's in the Sergeant Major Academy, which maybe down the line we'll be talking to him about. But this one is more about him being the entrepreneur that he was, or still is. The man is a business-savvy guy, and how he balanced that life with the Guard, as well as kind of being just an older guy joining military later in life and how it affected him and so much more. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you my good friend, First Sergeant Little.
Hello.
Hey, First Sergeant Little.
What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's so good to hear your voice. I almost want to ask you to sing for me for a second because I do miss those days.
Yeah. Those were the good old days, man. Those were the good old days.
I'm going to tell you, I tell stories because I finally made it in radio. I'm up doing radio, and every time I hear songs that you used to sing or the whole battery used to sing, it almost breaks down in tears.
Yeah.
I've been a story about this whole podcast, how it came to be. A friend of mine in radio said you need to start thinking about doing something else other than radio. Think about podcasting. And he's like, well, you know about the military, so why don't you talk about that? And I was like, I know a lot about the military, but I know people that know even more and have great stories, or they were just great leaders in my opinion. So I wanted to kind of talk to you about all sorts of things. I looked forward to actually having you back because I don't think we'll be able to cover everything right now. I want to kind of talk to you because I know that you started the military in a later point in your life. I want to kind of talk about that and hit on that, and then talk about maybe some like leadership advice you wish you would have gotten or wish you would give yourself back in the day. And if there's anything you don't want to hit on or anything you just kind of don't want to mention, just let me know and I can make sure it gets cut.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
So
I'm gonna come in real quick. I'm gonna say who you are. I'm gonna have you introduce yourself, tell your story, and we'll go from there. Okay.
sounds good.
Alrighty. I am talking with First Sergeant Little. I met him when he was E6 Sergeant Little. He was Chief Little. I got a story we'll maybe talk about on that, but I want him to tell you who he is. First Sergeant Little, go for it.
Yeah. Hey, it's great to be here. First Sergeant Little. I started my career a little over 18 years ago, and I joined active duty. I did come in a little bit later in life. I think I was 27 when I joined. But did serve about 5 years active duty, did a couple deployments, one to Iraq and Afghanistan. And after that, it was a lot of pressure on my wife. I have three kids. My youngest is special needs. And so we decided that the best move was to be able to stay in and still have access to the great TRICARE and coverage, and still I kind of had a love of artillery, and I enjoyed that, and I had an opportunity to do artillery, but in the Florida Army National Guard. So I made that transition after active duty, and I've been in ever since. And so it's been a good and a fun ride. Just going through all the interactions, the state active duties, all the different people that you get to meet here in the Guard, while still working a little bit on my own businesses and civilian education jobs, so forth. So
You are quite the philanthropist and just entrepreneur. Like, I remember you always telling like different stories about new projects that you were always getting into. That's actually kind of like how I started, just like, all right, I'll put a little bit of money here and down there. How did you kind of get into that lifestyle of like philanthropy and entrepreneurship?
yeah, it's I've got one of those similar stories. I was the kid that went to Publix and bought the 10-pack of bubble gum and went to school and sold it for $1 each, and made a $8 or $9 profit. And I didn't like our T-shirts that they had printed for our graduation, so I found a printer and I went out and printed our own. I had my brother design. He was like a graffiti artist, so he designed this really cool shirt for our graduation shirt at high school, and ended up selling hundreds of those, and made made money on that. And I just kind of got hooked on that, and I was like, man, buy low, sell high. Like, this is the basics of business. So I then went to college, got a bachelor's in business management, and then through the military was able to go back and get my MBA. But I think there are many people that are just simply born with that drive of entrepreneurship that are like, I really don't want to work for anybody. I want to go and do something on my own. So that's kind of been the drive there of, started and sold, numerous businesses. And I'm always looking for, new opportunities. And, we're currently in the process of starting another business. And but I'm at a point now where I'm doing a little bit less of that and trying to really focus more on just long-term investing. So I've gotten, a lot into taking the money that I've earned and investing that and getting my money really to work for me instead of me having to work so hard for the money. I think it's great when you're young, get that drive. I mean, being out there starting your own business will push you to your limits. During that you're learning so much, so some of the best skills that anyone can learn is sales and marketing. When you can sell yourself, when you can sell your ideas, when you can sell a product, when you can market that, really there's no end. You can go from one thing to the next, but it all comes down to being able to sell and market. And it's no different in the military. When you are wanting to move to a different unit, when you are wanting to go to a school, you sometimes have to go and sell why you want to go to that and kind of market to your leadership. Hey, I really want to go. This is how it will benefit the unit. Yes, it will benefit me as well, but if I go and I get this certification, we'll be able to do this where right now we can't. So you're always trying to do that. So it's just having those skills are life skills that can help you inside and outside of the military.
How do you balance all that with, actually, we were talking about, you mentioned state active duty in the pre-conversation of this, all the times that we were out there. How do you balance trying to run a business with the kind of on-demand moments that the National Guard has, whether you're in Florida for hurricane duties or you're up north where I'm at right now and possible wildfires or snowstorms? Like, how does a young entrepreneur do that that's also in the Guard?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to have a good team with you. Being in the Guard and serving in the Guard, and we know, being here in Florida, we know hurricane season, and so we know when the months that we could get called out, and so as always, you have to have those backup plans. You got your main mission, and you got your plan of how you're going to get from point A to point B, and you have your tertiary or your secondary and your tertiary plans. In case something happens. And it's no different in business. I knew I was in the Guard. I knew I could get called. I knew I would need to be there. So I, either hired or I had the right people in place that could run and knew what they were doing and I trusted. And that way when I was gone, I could focus on what I needed to do with the Guard or that state active duty or hurricane mission. And the people on my team were able to handle the business. It may not have been perfect all the time, but most of the time we have access to cell phones, so they could call or text, and we could talk through it, and then they would make the decision. But I think I know with technology and AI, there's a lot of businesses that can be run by just one person. So I'm not the one to say that that's not possible, but I think having a good, solid team of people around you will help you to be much more successful. So like if you're isolated compared to being surrounded by other great people that see the mission and the vision of the company, that you're able to treat them well, train them well, take care of them. They will take care of you when you need to step out and step away, because everybody's working towards the same mission and the same vision.
Okay. One of the big things I want to talk about is I met you. I met you pretty later in your career, but I found out at that time that you had actually joined the Guard at a later age. Do you think that was actually a better move for you than joining early? Why did you join at a later age, by the way? Because I know the reason, but people listening to this may not know the reason.
Yeah, so when I graduated, again being an entrepreneur, I graduated high school. I was fired up, ready to go start my own business. I was going to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. That was my goal. That was my mission. Got married very young to my high school sweetheart. We had two kids. I had my son and my daughter, and we were kind of done, and we were moving forward in life. I was doing well. We had a couple businesses that we were running, and that they were doing well. And then we had the surprise baby, my youngest son Matthew, and unfortunately he was born with severe special needs, and that kind of stopped and changed everything. It changed our goals. It changed what we needed. We knew that we were going to need really great insurance to be able to get all the care and the coverage that he needed. So I started researching. I looked at a lot of different options, different things at the time. Again, this is over 18 years ago, but I happened to walk into a gas station, got some fuel, walked inside to get a drink, and I saw this flyer for the military, and it said, pay off your college, sign-on bonuses, 100% health care coverage. And I said, so let me talk about this with my wife. And so for me, it was something that would have been really cool. Like, man, I'd love to go and join the military. That would be exciting. Travel the world, get to do fun things. But more importantly, it was really about, ultimately getting insurance for my son to make sure that I guess at the time, again, I was still fairly young. I saw, you hear the stories of people that have gotten millions of dollars in medical bills and debt and things like that, and that's what I was seeing. And so I was like, I need to fix this problem, fairly quickly. So I went in, I talked with a recruiter. I had about $47,000 in college debt at the time, from my bachelor's degree. And, we had, I don't know, a few $1,000s in credit card debt like most young families do. And, the Army just kind of met everything. It met, getting the bonus we were able to pay off the debt, getting the, college repayment, is what I ended up doing. So instead of getting the GI Bill per se, I got the college repayment. So they paid off, my entire debt minus a few $1,000s in interest. And then we had 100% healthcare coverage. But now again, when I originally joined, I joined active duty. I joined for a little over 4 years was my original contract. I ended up extending at the end so that I could stay with my unit while we were in Afghanistan. So I ended up just right around 5 years active duty. And then we had to decide, do I get out completely or do we transition? Because we still had Matthew and he still had needs. And so I talked with a recruiter up in Washington where I was stationed at JBLM and talked with them. And, they said, a great option would be either the Army Reserve or the Florida Army National Guard. That gets you back to your family in Florida. You can do it part-time. You can still do artillery and so forth. So we looked at that and said, well, that's the right move for us. And but at that time, when I joined, I was 27, so I would have been 32 when I came into the Guard. But whether I think that was better or not, it's hard to say. I think it was easier being older coming into the military. I had a lot more. I remember being at basic training. I was the old guy, even though I was only 27, but I was the old guy. And so all the younger kids would come and ask for advice, whether it be about relationships or about the training or, things like that. So I was kind of able to, in a sense, mentor them, even though to me, I was still young, but to them, I had 6, 7, 8 years on them. But I think it did help when I deployed, because I deployed just a few months out of AIT. So I did basic training, AIT, got stationed at the time was Fort Lewis out in Washington. As soon as I arrived, they said, hey, you're deploying in 30 days. So, very quickly I was found, in Iraq. And of course I trained on artillery, but we went as mechanized infantry. So the unit had been training all year for that deployment. And when I showed up, I'm like, I don't have any training for any of this. But I look back and I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I had an entire year of learning. I wasn't learning artillery skills, but I was learning a ton of skills that I think helped move my career along much faster. But I think coming in a little more mature helped me kind of build relationships, helped me stay focused and learn a little bit more. I was less about, hanging out with the guys and more about, hey, how can I learn? How can I get better? What classes can I go to? So anytime there was a training, like while I was deployed in Iraq, like I went to that, whether it was Duke training or learning how to use the CROW system. I volunteered. I went to every training, but it helped me to stand out. I've been a big thing. Like, you got to take advantage of every opportunity. And when you have an opportunity to go to school, then go to a school. Get that help. Get that certification. It's going to help you in your career. But at the same time, I think I look back and I'm like, man, I probably should have done this much sooner. I should have done this younger, when I was younger. But it is what it is. Everything has worked out well.
I would say,
I've now.
Are you up for? You got to be up for sergeant major soon, shouldn't you?
Yeah. So I just recently made the CSM list, and so now I'm just I'm in the sergeant major academy now.
No kidding.
And should be finishing that up. Yeah, thank you. So I'll be finishing that up around January, and our old unit will be returning somewhere near the beginning of the year from where they are, and so hoping to be able to get back there and finish out my last few years as a CSM there. So, but we'll see what happens.
I'm rooting for you on that one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, yeah, I mean, I started in artillery. I'd love to end my career in an artillery unit as well. But, I mean, it does bring up another thing that as I'm working with soldiers and younger soldiers and, being able to kind of give advice and things that I've learned, one of the biggest things of advice that I would give, especially to young soldier, or young, people that are getting in whatever branch, is choose your MOS wisely. Now, I love artillery, and artillery has been great, and it's been a lot of fun. But what I did on the civilian side for about 5 or 6 years was I worked with top-level executives at some of the largest companies in the world, and coaching them, on leadership, communication, but also how to find and land your next role, how to negotiate, interview skills, those types of things, which was great. And I really enjoy it, and I miss doing that a little bit. But it really opened my eyes to thinking, because I worked with a lot of retired military officers and higher-ranking non-commissioned officers that were getting out, and they were transitioning, and they didn't really know what to do. And it was so much easier working with those that had skills that they had learned. So while they were in the military, they had, really good skills that were helping, that looked great to the civilian side. I know for me, talking with other companies and just talking with people about different job opportunities and so forth, and they want to know about what I do in the Army, and I start talking about artillery, and they're just completely like deers in the headlight. They don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, they think of like the old cannons in the Civil War, but it's really difficult because they're like, okay, I understand now kind of what you did, but how does that correlate to what we do? And so really I have to focus on, leadership and development and problem solving and working under high stress situations, that kind of stuff. But I think back and I'm like, man, I really should have done something, because the military is great. They can teach you some of the greatest skills. And right now they're ramping up AI, and, drones and, a lot of those types of things where you can actually learn. And when you get out, you can walk into, multiple six-figure roles at some of these defense companies or some of the tech companies, and so forth. So, my advice is to look at where the future of things are going, and then what are the skills or MOSs that you can transition to in the military and have them pay for you to get all the skills, so that when you do decide, whether you go all the way through retirement or you get out early, when you get out, you can actually go and walk into where companies are fighting to get you on their team, instead of having people, I would say like myself, if I were to get out and try to go get a job out there, it would be much more difficult. And I have an MBA, and I've done a lot of things, and I've been an entrepreneur, and I've done I have a lot of skills that I could bring to a company, but they're looking like, okay, well, you spent all this time in the military, and from their perspective, you didn't really do a whole lot that pertains to our company, or pertains to what we're doing, so we're going to pass. So again, I guess those are things that I wish I would have probably done a little bit different. I don't regret doing artillery, and it's all worked out fine. But if I were to do it again, I probably would have picked a different MOS that was more correlated with the future and the needs and technology, to be able to really walk out into a company that's ready to hire, ready to pay well, and still be able to take care of my family.
I like that. I so much I want to talk to you about. I'm going to have you back on, but I want to get one more thing from you before I have to let you go. Leadership advice. You are becoming an E5 for you never got demoted, so this is easier for you to say. But what leadership advice would you go back and give yourself just becoming an E5 moving forward to where you are, that maybe would help your career, or somebody's listening to this and it could help their career?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson in leadership is to understand that those that you lead are not there to serve you, but that you are there to serve them. And it goes back to what they call servant leadership. But I think there's a mixture of, like Jocko Willings wrote his book on extreme ownership. And I think it's those two things together, is that you as the leader need to understand that you own everything. So everyone that is underneath you, the responsibilities that you have, like if you're a section chief, or if you're, what we have, like an ammo team chief or whatever, like that's your world, and you need to own that. And you need to, in a sense, take responsibility to that. And when something goes wrong, it's not about blaming your team and what they did wrong, but it's looking back and going, well, where did I mess up? Was it the training? Did I not communicate well enough? Did I not, get the standard to my team? Things like that. So not extreme ownership, but it's also there of how can you as that leader invest in the people that you're leading to make sure that not only that you're creating an environment that they can thrive in, an environment that they're excited to be in, and a team or a section that they want to be part of. So there's that aspect, but also that you train hard and you fight hard. So when it's time to train, then man, you need to get in there and train. You need to be that leader that says, hey, no, we're not going to sit around on our phones. We're going to get out here. They gave us 2 hours to train, so I want you to get out there and, whatever it is that you're doing. In our sense, it would be artillery. I'd be like, hey, go get the truck, hook up the howitzer. We're going to come out here in this field, and we're going to start doing emplacements. We're going to go through dry fire missions. We're going to do this because we are going to be the absolute best section here.
Yeah.
I want every single person to do every job. I want everybody to know everything. And so it takes that. I think a lot of times I see E4s going to E5, and they've never had a leadership position before, and they get the rank, but then they still act like an E4. I think if you're a specialist and you're that E4 and you're coming close to that E5, you need to start talking with your leaders, the leaders that you think are great leaders. You need to start asking them, hey, what do you think I should be doing? How can I best prepare myself now? And start seeing yourself as that NCO and start talking to yourself like, okay, when I get my E5 and I become that leader, this is the type of leader that I want to be. This is how I want to lead. When I get that E6 and I'm a section chief, this is what type of section chief I want to be. When I go from 6 to 7, all right, this is when I have control of an entire platoon, this is the type of leader that I want to be. So you should be learning from your current leaders two different things. One, what are those leaders doing that you really love? And you're like, man, when I do that, I want to do that same thing because I really like what they're doing. And also, what are some of the things your leaders are doing that you don't like and nobody else likes it? So you should always be watching your leaders. Everybody likes to complain about the leaders, but like, well, I can't believe they did this, or I can't believe they didn't do this, or they didn't do that, or I can't believe they're making this decision. Learn from that. So when you get to be into that position, you don't go and do the same exact thing. You're never going to be perfect, but when you keep those that you lead, when you're like, hey, I'm here to serve them. I'm here to make sure that they are trained well, that they are well taken care of, that I communicate very clearly to them. They know what's expected of them, and they know what's going to happen if they don't meet the expectations. So they know all of that. They know the mission and why we're doing this. They know the importance of it. And I am there not only to help train them, but also getting to know each person on your team as well. Yeah. Like, do you know them? Do you know their background, their family? Like, why did they join the Army? What are their goals and plans for the future so that you can help them? So not only to be successful with what they're doing now, but to help them to be successful into the future. And I think that's where many times I see a lot of people just lacking, because either they're not taking ownership, or they have this idea that the people that are underneath them that they're leading are there to serve them as the leader, instead of the leader there to serve them. And I think it's a big mistake, and you'll end up biting them in the butt. So that would be the advice that I have. You can focus on those two things, and then the third thing would simply become a great communicator. Because if you can't communicate the mission, if you can't communicate basic instructions, if you can't communicate the expectations, things like that, you're going to have a hard time as a leader. So take extreme ownership, be that servant leader, and be a really great communicator, and then set the example.
You want to. Well, I was going to say, you want to talk about, watching leaders that you admire. My first real introduction to you was I was going through reclass school. You were going through ALC, and my instructors at reclass school let me just hang around with you, and you were essentially like my first chief. In fact, when we did those big fire missions towards the end of your ALC where you guys had to fire your rounds and then we had to be on the guns, I got to watch you, and you took me along, and you're like, all right, hey, here's what this position does. And all my knowledge of the 777 comes from that base of just watching you sit there and be like, okay, this is what this position does, this is how this operates, and moving on from there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, but I remember that all the time.
I do remember that. Anytime that you have an opportunity, to share your craft, to share your skills with a lower enlisted, with somebody that is coming up, take that advantage. Like I love the 777. I love artillery. So when I have an opportunity to teach that to somebody or to share my knowledge, I love it. I want to take advantage of that. So whether you're artillery or whatever it is that you're doing, take that advantage. And, like we have to, like my focus right now is I know I'm getting down to the end of my career here, maybe 3 or 4 more years left and I'll be gone. My big focus is, hey, how can I download everything that I've learned and all that I know and download that to help create better leaders and to help make sure that, if I end up back at the artillery unit, that everybody understands the importance of what we're doing and safety and accurate fires and doing things right the first time. And, like, how can I download all of that so that when I leave, I can feel good that, hey, I did all that I could do to set them up for success. And, if every leader at all positions, at all levels from E5 all the way to sergeant majors would do that, it will only continue to help improve the overall functions of the military.
That's kind of the idea behind this podcast, is making sure that people of the future generations have great leadership advice from leaders like you. I've been talking with First Sergeant Little. Appreciate it. First Sergeant, like I said, it's so good to hear your voice. I just want to say goodbye real quick, and then I'm gonna say I don't even know how to say goodbye to you, because it's just so great talking to you and listening to you. I remember back in the day just sitting by and letting you just talk, and I'd be like, all right, cool, whatever this man says is almost like something you should either write down, put in a book, or just record for future endeavors. So it's just so good hearing from you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you reaching out and giving me this opportunity. I look forward to talking to you again.
I can't say thank you enough to First Sergeant Little. I got to spend quite a bit of time with him when I first got into the artillery, and then when I was in the same unit as he was in Florida, good old Carlos Battery of the 2nd of the 116th, and I learned a lot from him, and we're going to have him back on for sure. There is so much more life advice that I think he has to offer that you, the listener, can absolutely benefit from. If you want to be a part of this podcast, you're a leader in some shape or form, whether you're a corporal all the way up to sergeant major, maybe you're an officer, I want to hear from you and talk about it. You can message me on email, or email me, I guess, at david.donaldson.iv@gmail.com. Put in the title, Leading the Guard, and tell me what you have to say, because there's good leadership advice out there that's just not everybody's going to get it because you only see your unit. The idea of this podcast is to spread it out amongst everybody. With that being said, I'll catch you later. Have a good one.